Welcome, my friends. We are back with Pits and Riffs for the first time in over a month. We have a new logo, a new theme. So the whole concept now is that everything is just going to be black and yellow and a little bit of white, instead of all those other crazy colors I had going with the logo and everything. So that is the reason why I'm wearing a Pittsburgh Penguins jersey, because to go with the new black and yellow constant theme, might as well be wearing black and yellow. So let's get into it. I got a little bit to talk about because I haven't made an episode in about a month. So I've got a couple concerts to review, one of which was almost a month ago at this point. That was the Volbeat concert in Camden, which was a great concert. Hailstorm and the Ghost Inside opened for Volbeat, and then Volbeat came on at about, I want to say, 9:10-ish. Played for about an hour and a half, maybe. Um, a lot of great songs. You know, I really wanted to hear Acid Rain, and they played that, which was awesome. They played it early, so I didn't have to wait the entire concert to see if they would play it or not. But I thought it was, kind of what you would have expected from that tour, maybe minus. I mean, they started with Devil's Bleeding Crown. A lot of the other concerts I've been to this year, they kind of start with the first track off of their most recent album. I don't mind Devil's Bleeding Crown, but that album, God of Angels Trust, had a lot of good songs on it. So might have been cool to hear Devils Are Awake. To start the concert off, I thought that was the intention the first time I heard that song, was that that would be the first one they play live, if for nothing else, than just the references to the pit. Thought that would, get the pit going. Um, but, good start. They go to Lola Montez. They wound up playing actually four total songs from Seal the Deal and Let's Boogie, which, it's about the 10th year anniversary. It's a 9-year-old album now, but it's all the hits, really. Black Rose for Evite, Seal the Deal, and The Devil's Bleeding Crown. And then, like I said, Lola Montez, that was the only one off of Outlaw Gentlemen and Shady Ladies for the night. So it was, I do wish that they would play more, like, I don't know how to say it, like sort of the more niche songs. You know what I'm saying? Sort of the songs that, like, you wouldn't think of typically if you're, asked to name 10 Volbeat songs. I'm thinking of, like, if you go back to Rock the Rebel, Metal the Devil, what would be cool to hear from that? Like The Garden's Tale or something, or even Mr. and Mrs. Ness. Um, you know, from the strength, the sound, the songs, we don't really hear anything from that album anymore. And there are some really good and some really heavy songs off that album. Um, and then, like I've said before, I'm always interested to see what a band will play from their second most recent album on a given night. And from Servant to the Mind, they did play two songs, Shotgun Blues and The Devil Rages On, which I guess are the two that we're going to hear for a long period of time. Say No More is also a good one, so I hope they bring that back for future tours. That just hasn't been retired forever now. Um, but yeah, it was a good show. Um, I also wish that bands would play two sets, but that's just me. If you're headlining, I don't know. I don't know what the expectation is, but it'd be kind of cool to hear two sets worth of songs, especially from a band that's been around for 20 years now. But I won't get too critical about that. Anyways, the most recent concert that I saw was actually last night at the time I'm recording this, which is Saturday. I saw Dream Theater play at the Santander Performing Arts Center in Reading, Pennsylvania. Um, as I expected, they started with playing Parasomnia in full. Um, the live debut of six of the songs off that album. Well, technically five. Uh, and then Are We Dreaming is the other. Even though, that's not really a song, it's more of an interlude. But regardless, they played the whole album live for the first time, starting with In the Arms of Morpheus, and then they go through the whole album. Night Terror and Midnight Messiah they had played on their most recent tour. I did see the live debut of Midnight Messiah, though, and if anybody went to the Philly show and the Reading show, then they really, I think, technically saw the live debut of every song, maybe. Maybe Night Terror had been out and they'd been playing that already. But at least, every song except Night Terror, everybody that went to those two shows saw live for the first time. Um, and so, I really I agree with the band. Like that is definitely an album that was made to be played live. And it was really awesome to hear start to finish. Especially, I know the band has said that Dead Asleep is kind of their favorite song off the album. I would agree. I think a lot of Dream Theater fans would agree. I mean, there are some really good songs off this album. You could go 2 through 5, and they're all fantastic. Um, Bend the Clock is another good one. Shadow Man Incident, I'm kind of on the fence about still. But really good album from Dream Theater, so I'm glad they played it live from start to finish. I wish more bands would do that too. Like if you're gonna go on tour with a new album, I mean this is a 71-minute album. Like this isn't just a 45-minute affair. And they played it live and then still did a second act. Um, the second act was a little I I don't know if I would say confusing, but I was a little confused at times. They really set the tone at the start of the second act. When they came back from intermission with As I Am. Um, they went from that to The Enemy Inside, and I thought, okay, cool, we're gonna get a mixture of some hits and some singles. Then they go to A Rite of Passage, which still kind of on brand. I feel it, but everything is sort of concentrated in that 2000s to early 2010s era Dream Theater. Well, I guess Enemy Inside, guess you could say early 2010s, 2013. Um, then they go into they go to Through My Words and then Fatal Tragedy. And that for me was kind of a head scratcher because of all the songs that I expected to hear from that album last night, that wouldn't have been the one just because they've played that album so many times over the years. They go from that to Peruvian Skies. They had a little bit of, Wish You Were Here and Wherever I May Roam, which is, two really funny ends of a large spectrum. And that one, I kind of understand. That's more of a song that they typically have played in South America and Central America. So I guess, bringing it to the United States for the first time in a while is pretty cool. And then they played Take the Time, which again I thought was pretty cool. Now we're getting into the heavier, like the earlier stuff. Um, but that was it, and I mean, they are getting up there in terms of age. And it was a long show. I did not expect Take the Time to be the last song of the second act. I expected at least one or two more songs after this. Again, it's not a criticism. I just didn't know like what I guess we could expect from the second act. Actually, it occurred to me before the concert began that holy crap, this might be just Parasomnia and then a change of seasons. There might not even be a second act. And that scared me a little bit until James said, we're going to take a brief intermission and we'll come back. And I was like, oh, good. Like, some bands will play 90 minutes and that's it. Dream Theater showed in the first U.S. tour of this year that will not be the case. They are good. They at least played two sets then, and so they played two sets now. So the only thing that I think I would cut out of this is Fatal Tragedy and Through My Words. I think you know, Dream Theater fans who have seen that a lot over the years, it's sort of, cool. It'd be good to play something a little different. You know what I'm saying? They did play a Change of Seasons live for the first time since 2017. I actually forgot that they played that whole song live in 2017. I went back and looked at the set list and stuff, which I'm looking at now, and just to see like, oh yeah, When I went to see them, this was my first um, Dream Theater concert ever. Was at the Merriam Theater in Philadelphia, November 19th, 2017. Same thing. That encore, they played A Change of Seasons live from start to finish. Um, so that was pretty cool. But it's another, I did enjoy that anyways. Um, that was also really fantastic set list. I mean, they played Images and Words live the second half of that, kind of their 25th year anniversary tour. And it was sort of the same thing though. They played 7 songs in the first act, so I guess they played 7 songs here in the second act. So they're pretty much right where they were then, which is awesome. At least in terms of what they're able to kind of play live. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was a great concert. I don't think there was a bad seat in the house. My seat definitely wasn't bad. Um, and that vlog will be up on this channel tomorrow. So enjoy that. Anyways, let's move into the breakdown. Today's episode is called Emprog because I talked a lot about Prague, Dream Theater, Volbeat a little bit, not really, but now I'm going to talk about another Prague album, Empath by Devin Townsend. Hence M Prague. Get it? Like Empath, and then mixing Prague into it. So you get it. You understand at this point. So let's talk about Empath by Devin Townsend. 2019 album by Devin Townsend, released basically a year before COVID started, and I'll make mention of that later in this little breakdown as well. But here's kind of the backstory of this album. This was sort of the new start, or the start of a new era in Devin's discography. The early albums from Ocean Machine through Ziltoid the Omniscient, they had elements of prog, but were mainly the sort of alternative metal. Infinity and Physicist were kind of borderline extreme metal at times, especially Physicist. Then came the Devin Townsend project a little bit later, which were a series of 7 albums that were a lot lighter from his previous solo work, except for Deconstruction. They were, sort of on the sort of between alternative metal and then with elements of mainstream added, so almost like an early sort of metalcore. Um, the final album of the Devin Townsend project was Transcendence, and even by that point, the music was a lot more radio friendly. It was a lot more melodic and even progressive. Epic Cloud and Sky Blue were kind of the start of a series of albums that were a lot just hard rock more than heavy metal, for the most part anyway. And Transcendence didn't really have much of what I'd categorize as metal at all, besides maybe Offer Your Light. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, it just seemed like more of the music was heading in this hard rock direction. Um, Starting, I guess, with Liberation off of Epicloud. That, I guess, sort of set the tone for the next 20, what has it been? 13 years actually now. Um, but yeah, Empath was the first album post Devin Townsend project, but it sort of fell in line with Transcendence and the direction his work was generally heading in. It wasn't like a giant swing towards rock or towards metal or lighter or heavier music. It was almost kind of, it made sense with the line of how his work had been trending. It was a lot lighter, but there was still that extreme element, or that extreme metal element at times. But generally speaking, Empath is more progressive, slower, more melodic at times, but still with some of those kick-ass heavy metal songs. So let's talk about it. This is the theme of the album, in Devin's words. The theme of Empath was always about going into that fear, the uncertainty of life and middle age, then confronting it and coming out the other side of it with some sort of realization. Although life is not easy, it can be within us to rise to those occasions that are demanded of us, and I wanted to write something that represented many angles of life with an overarching theme that ultimately is one of hope in uncertain times. This was released a year before COVID, so very prophetic. So let me go through it track by track. So it starts off with Castaway, which is sort of not really an overture, but sort of an intro to the album. But as opposed to most of his other intros to albums, besides the ambient ones, this is basically just a soundscape of an ocean. There really aren't any instruments. It's just sort of island ambience, and then a choir comes in on top of waves crashing on a beach, and you even hear a little bit of campfire crackling. The only thing really comparable to this in Devin's work is Effervescent off Epicloud, but that's also kind of the opposite. There's really no sound at all except for vocals, whereas with this, it's, sound effects for the most part, make you sort of a soundscape. Say you on a beach somewhere, and then with the opera in the background. Then you go into Genesis. I will admit, the first time I heard Genesis, I cringed a little bit. For me, it was way too progressive, or trying to be, anyways. And I still think parts of it aren't really that good. But it's definitely one you can't play for your average friend if you're trying to get them into Devin's music, no matter how much they like metal and or how much they like progressive music. The build up after a million years would go by just kind of ends abruptly, which I thought would be more of a, it would continue to build from there. But it kind of stopped at that point, and then it stops again a little bit before the chorus comes in for the first time. And then the bridge is honestly like nails on a chalkboard a bit. When we're apart, we fall, followed by whatever whatever succeeds that, whatever you want to call that. I don't even know how he got that effect. And it generally just kind of lacks energy. I will say the chorus is pretty sick. This is also the first time Devin spells out for us what the album is, really about, or what one of the underlying themes is, which is this whole concept of the island of the mind. um Throughout the album, he compares these different thoughts and feelings to an island existing inside his mind where it all marinates and lives on its own. And when he, or any humans, I would add, interact with others, they're divulging a part of that island and then taking in part of someone else's as well. Hence the title and central theme of the album being related to empathy. Sort of this, back and forth between understanding people and people understanding you. Then you go into Spirits Will Collide, and this, I can't even imagine how many people that this is, really affected this song, especially during COVID. A lot of people like this song because of the underlying message of it's okay, and I would agree. I have a couple of criticisms of the song, but I'll hold off on them since it's generally a really impactful song. And probably one that, again, people, got a lot of people through COVID. The messages of you're strong enough, remember the flame in your heart burns strong, don't you forget that you are loved. I think it's one of the most meaningful sets of lyrics he's written, if not the most meaningful. Um, and it's a really good song musically as well. Then you go into Evermore, which is the song with the cats. Not the last song that Devin Townsend would write about cats. There were several that followed. Um, so, in the music video, anyways, the song is about cats. This one's also one of the heavier songs on the album. I would say second heaviest, only behind Hear Me. And essentially, it's about moving on from a chapter in your life, whether good or bad, no matter how many failures or misgivings you have about your past. No matter what, those memories will live forever. You'll return to them at times, even randomly, and they're important to helping you learn along the way. The line, I must learn from this reality if I intend to awake, in the pre chorus kind of spells this out pretty obviously. Then Sprite. This is a really fun one to dissect. First off, it starts with a story that's a callback to Terria in the song Canada, where the story first makes its appearance. In this one, anyways, it has an ending. So a bear comes around, and the bird who has lost his will to fly rediscovers how, and through courage, he flies away from the bear. So most of the song appears to be about living within the confines of a mortal world in limited space inside a vast infinite universe, otherwise known as cosmophobia. Um, Throughout, it is little pieces of advice about dealing with this concept of mortality and the noise in the world outside. Um, the lyrics, in a world that's subdivided, hold your own ceremony and carry on. Again, this album must have done wonders for listeners who discovered it before COVID, of which I wasn't one. I only discovered this album in 2022. I only discovered Devin's early work late in 2019, and it was really just Ocean Machine and Infinity and Terria and Accelerated Evolution, and that was almost it at that point. And then some of the other earlier albums early on in COVID. Um, there are also some pretty impactful lines about how little people know and how sour they typically feel, despite maybe portraying otherwise. Think of everyone you know. Everybody is broken. Take a look around. Everyone is sad. Those are lyrics of the pre-chorus. Pretty accurate in 2019, very accurate in 2025. Apparently, the person who wrote the Genius page to the lyrics of the song asked Devin about the end on his cameo, and it has to do with something his son once said when he was 11 years old and about how much time his dad was spending on the record. So he let his son mess around with his microphone and creating, and recorded something about the frustrations of his dad always out in his shed creating a record. Hence, dad in the garden, all brokenhearted, kind of upset about, his son not sort of understanding what he does, I think. The final lyrics of the song: thank you for keeping trying. Slow progress is still progress. That's just another really positive message I wanted to highlight. And always remember that Rome wasn't built in a day. Slow progress is still progress. So keep on going. Um, Hear Me is the real metal track on the album, which reminds me a lot of his SYL stuff. Maybe that was the intention, anyways. There are also some callbacks throughout the song. The idea of "You Know Why" goes back at least to "Whoa No" off Epiclouder, probably even before that, but I can't think of anything specifically. Or in this case, "You Know Why." Um, that's found in a lot of Devin's music over the 2010s. Whereas off Whoa No in Epic Louder, it's sort of I Know Why. Now it's You Know Why. Um, I also think that the bridge with the word shine repeated over and over is a reference to Devin's song of the same name off Alien. Um, you know, a fantastic song. In fact, thematically, the song even reminds me of Shine. By far, this is my favorite track off the album because it's the heaviest. But also, it it's just a cool kick-ass song. And it's sort of, the album is sort of this ebb and flow between lighter music and heavier music. And this, I think, is the perfect song to have between Sprite and Why. So speaking of why, vocally, this is some of Devin's finest work in his incredible career. The range, the opera-style vocals, the few screams, which aren't really screams, that we know Devin can do them. The music video, I think, really tells the underlying story of what the song is about. Everything, kind of feels wrong, and the desire to run away from everything, all the problems, the judgment, etc. Ultimately, instead of running away, the song ends with why run away? Why when we could just walk away? Which to me says, don't run away from your problems. Walk away from the things that aren't working for you. So I'm actually really glad I got to see this one live on Devin's most recent tour. He played this in New York, and it was awesome. Then you go into Borderlands. So this is basically, if there's one song that encapsulates Devin's career post deconstruction, this would be it. There's some metal, there's some prog, there's some ambience. This has just about everything. In terms of the meaning, this is what Devin has said about the song. There's a sign on the Borderlands representing that sort of line between your conscious mind and your creative mind that says shine like the galaxy, although no one will hear this. And I think that's also really important on a creative level because I think a lot of times, that we want to be immortal. We want our music to last beyond us. Um, we want it to be forever. But if that's your motivation, I think that's another way of holding it. So the idea of Borderlands is to do it for the sake of it, although no one will ever hear it. Although it doesn't matter, although that in the scheme of the universe, all this is, it doesn't exist. So it's very much existential, but I like it. And you also hear the same lines from Castaway at the end of the song, which is sort of this full circle moment, at least to this point in the album, and almost sort of a get ready for this, before Requiem and Singularity. Um, Requiem is the segue into Singularity, which actually kind of the segue starts at the very end of Borderlands. And even though it's short, it's pretty powerful. I think the theme of this is I know there's a lot of suffering, but keep your head up and do your best to be there for everyone around you. Almost like, be human, which is fitting considering the next song, and, certain aspects of what it is to be human. Um, but Singularity is how this album wraps up. And this deals a little bit with empathy, a lot with empathy. It also deals a lot with artificial intelligence and even with existentialism, and a lot of the other themes that are found throughout the album. So it's split into 6 parts, which total 23 minutes and 32 seconds. So let's talk about each of those parts. Adrift is the first part of the song, more or less your main character for the song. If you think of it as Devin, that's one thing. I kind of think this as, more of a story than autobiographical, even though I know Devin kind of puts himself into this story. Um, but the first part of the song is about feeling alone, defeated, and directionless. The main character, who I'm just gonna say main character. I won't say Devin because it's sort of this storyline as opposed to, like I said, autobiographical. They feel betrayed. They feel lied to. Like nobody else can really understand the pain they're going through. But at the end of this part, you have this little moment of brightness with the lyrics, through the meadows, through the fields, shine forever, shine on me, which to me kind of says, all right, life may seem bleak, especially, in 2019 and then even more so in 2020. But there's this little light at the end of the tunnel, and you need to do your best to walk towards it, walk through it, and get to the other side where life is much better than maybe you've experienced as of late. Um, I is the second part of the song, and I think it's really about discovering your identity. It's also where the song gets really heavy. Um, Not only that, but understanding the idea of what you are and what you want to be, with the concept, sort of being fluid. There's going to be a lot of pain, maybe some missteps, and at times it might seem like the universe is against you, but you need to figure out what it is that makes you, you. Ultimately, the main character concludes that the difference between darkness and light comes from within. And by the end of the song, or this part of the song, that character sees that light in others, that maybe they didn't see before. Yet, at the end of this part of the song, which segues into the next part, it's declared that despite this light, there are still monsters inside. Devin says about this lyric in the following part of the song, yes, there's beauty and yes, there's hope, but we can't ignore the fact that there's horrors that we have to contend with. Then we get into There Be Monsters, the third part of the song, where this theme sort of continues. So it seems as though, he's found the light, but with that comes a lot of narcissism and egotistical attitudes. Um, so despite seeing the light, there are still these negative pieces of the past and the mentality that's comes with them, that you have to contend with. In essence, there are all these wars going on inside your head, where maybe it's easy to say I'm going to change for the better and see the light. It's a tough thing to do day after day, and when that sort of motivation starts to lessen, that's when these wars really take place. You have to make sure that the light wins out in the end, otherwise you'll lose the war, and sink back to a place of darkness. But at the end, the monsters do kind of lose the war and the light wins. Devin says about this part of the song, at the end of this part, the monsters that are supposed to be represented in this song, I like to picture in my mind's eye. At the end, it goes light, there's a big breakdown thing that happens, and then the monsters are saying in the mind's eye, shine, for you are the light, galaxies unfold within your soul. Yet at the same time, like I said, while the monsters maybe aren't preaching that sort of darkness anymore, now they're preaching narcissism. So on the Selfish Messiah lyric that ends this part of the song, Devin says, and this is supposed to be these monsters that are feeding this idea of narcissism, like you're special, you're different than everybody else. So a little bit too much brightness, to the point where, you are the light, you're special, you found the light, you are the light. Then it goes into part four, which is called Curious Gods. It starts with this transition from Selfish Messiah to Try the Papaya, which Devin explains as it leads from the sense of foreboding, all is lost, to the sense of no. It's just another thing in a long line of things. It's almost like we've transcended our own fears and our ups and downs, and now we are able to create something that is separate from us. And so, in my mind's eye, with Curious Gods, is just a scientist who's just tinkering. He's fixing things, and in the background, you hear the newscast from artificial intelligence and how it's like such a threat. And then you hear these monsters roaring in the background, and the idea is that he unwillingly creates something that is superior to him. I can't sum it up any better than that. This is also a relatively short part of the song. It's almost a segue into what seems like the final battle of the mind in this fifth part, um, which is called Silicon Scientists. So, this is where that concept of artificial intelligence really comes into play for the first time. Um, Singularity itself, the title of the song, is the idea of technological growth coming out of the hands of humans and into the artificial intelligence that they're creating, which is quite scary to think about. But there's also a double meaning to this part because it's also about the mind's way of thinking, as Devin says. See what you've done now? You've created something that's ultimately going to be the end of you. As in, you made these changes and it only led to this narcissism, which may be worse than how things were before. Again, little maybe too much lightness. Now that you've escaped from the dark, I'd be lying to say I hadn't felt that myself before, going from darkness to light and then maybe too much light and having that sort of narcissism. Um, the AI is basically saying, we're in this together. We can lose our grip on reality together. This narcissism is the light, and you should be glad you found me. This sort of transitions with the whispered line, return to the ocean, perhaps a callback to Ocean Machine, and the character has a reckoning at the end of this part. Know that, with the line, know that seasons change and we must forgive ourselves. Sees this fear as any animal would do. And then that puts us into the sixth and final part of the song, which is Here Comes the Sun. I would imagine that that is inspired by the Beatles song of the same name. So Devin says about this part, that's a climax of the record. What we're trying to say with Here Comes the Sun is it is chaos and no one knows. I don't know, you don't know, but if you shine for me, I'll shine for you. The lines from the ending of Adrift come back through the meadow, through the trees, shine forever, shine on me. At the end of the storm, which is the process beginning with the feeling of hopelessness and adrift, or, you know, the process of finding the light, and the narcissism, and then finally here the idea is that at the end you eventually do find the light and shine on as the sun or a rainbow would. It's almost a playbook for how to live in the light, stay in it for as long as possible despite the challenges in the future. Try not to be narcissistic and have a little too much light, and sort of become this beacon of light, not only for yourself but for those around you. And if you can't do it for yourself, then at the very least, do it for those around you. Um, if you can't shine for you, shine on me, or shine for me. So that's it. That's Empath by Devin Townsend. I really especially like Singularity, and again, it's really prophetic with the start of COVID less than a year later, and now all of these themes of artificial intelligence are really coming to the forefront. So, um, yeah, the future is indeed quite hard to see. So maybe this album even got some people through COVID. Who knows? Very likely. So anyways, let's transition now to the last part of today's show, which is soon in a pit near you. So Dream Theater is touring the U.S. right now, coming to a pit near you soon. They already played in a pit near me, although there was no pit at the Reading Theater, which I was glad about. I like sitting at concerts occasionally, especially 2.5 hour ones. Um, they are playing Parasomnia in its entirety. They are playing A Change of Seasons live in its entirety, and they are playing some other great songs as well, mainly from the early 2000s through the early 2010s. So yeah, Volbeat is touring in Europe, and I am still trying to figure out if I can make Lancaster work in early December to see Spirit Box when I have work the next day. Probably not, but who knows at this point. I didn't think I was actually going to see Ghost this year until like 2 weeks before. I had tickets, but I didn't know if I wanted to do that and then see Shinedown the next night. And then I wound up doing that and seeing both of them. So, anyways, that is going to be it for today's episode. Thank you guys very much for watching, and peace out, broskies.